So good afternoon, everyone joining us from the University of Leh. Thank you, Sonam Joldan, for arranging this talk. This falls under the Memorandum of Understanding between our two organizations, and we are extremely happy to be organizing this talk for you today. This is the second talk that we are organizing. The first two were held by Professor Shrikant Khandapalli, and this afternoon we are extremely delighted and indeed privileged to have Claude Arpi with us to give a talk to your students and faculty members. Before Claude goes into details with his talk, please allow me to briefly introduce Claude to you, although he really does not require introduction. He is such a well-known personality. But just to give you a bit of a run up on Claude. So Claude actually is a overseas citizen of India. He is born in, and he actually graduated as a dental surgeon from the Border University, and he came to India and he settled in India for the last 48 years. Sorry, my mistake. He's the author of many books, but just to name a few, he's the author of Fate of Tibet, which was brought out in 1999. The Dark Shall Be in the Night, The Karma of Tibet, which was brought out in 2001. Born in Sin, The Panchil Agreement, which he brought out in 2004. And more recently, he brought out a series called Tibet, The Lost Frontier in 2008. The Negotiations That Never Were, Dharamsala and Beijing in 2009, and so on. I would really recommend students of China and international relations to go through Claude's writings, go through his books, and also his blog, which is full of very interesting, very relevant information. Claude, as you know, has been writing regularly on Tibet-China, India border and military issues, as well as Indo-French relations for a whole host of platforms and newspapers and journals. He also writes for defense publications such as the USI Journal, the War College Journal, CDS Journal, and he has lectured on China and Tibet and the border issues at reputed institutions such as the NDC, ARTRAC, IDSA, USI, CLAWS, and so on. In March 2021, Claude made a presentation on India's northern boundary, history, legacy, and prospects for the Eastern Command in Kolkata, and in December to the same northern for the same organization on India-China boundary issues. So this is Claude's very illustrious background. Can imagine what it would be if he has to write a detailed biography on himself. So please, I hand over to Claude. Claude will give a talk for about half an hour today, which will be followed by another half an hour of question and answers. And I request Professor Sonam Joldan to conduct the question and answer sessions. The second part of his talk, Claude had actually prepared a 1 hour talk, which he's going to divide into two sections. The first one is today, of course. The second one we plan on Friday, this coming Friday, day after, at the same time, 3:30 on the same platform. So do join us as many as you can on Friday as well. So Claude, please, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Reban. Thank you, Dr. Sonam. I'm very happy to meet you again, even if it's virtually. We had a very good time 10 years ago, and I still very remember very dearly this good time that we had in Leh and visited Pangongso and all different things. So, as Reban mentioned, I didn't understand that. I thought it was I had 1 hour, so I cut it in two, and you left the first part today. So you have to. The topic is Sino-Indian Boundary historical background with emphasis on the Ladakh sector. Now, you are the first sufferer since 2000, May 2020. You know what has happened in Ladakh, and China attack in 5 places, Devsang, Galwan, Goka, and Hot Spring, and the Fingers in the Lake, as well as Demchok, has entered into India's territory. And part of the issue has been solved during the 17 rounds of talk in Chushul, Moldo, but still 2 areas are still under dispute. And it's very unfortunate that India has uh, not a very good neighbor. And I will speak about it in the second part of my presentation. But for century, though there's a war have taken place between Ladakh and Tibet, usually it was solved after some time, and both countries could have amicable contacts and a lot of trade contacts, including all the caravan going to Lhasa. So now, just geographical background. Border have not always existed. Actually, border are quite a recent thing. 240 million years ago, there was only one continent. So there was no border. There was Australia, you see, Africa, South America, North America, Europe, Siberia, China. And suddenly these continents split, and they became separate continent. And some 10 million years ago, they collided again. They came back into contact, and as a result, you have the mighty Himalaya, and you have Tibet, the roof of the world, as well as Ladakh, and all the Himalayan belt, which is very similar, which is all the result of that collision 10 million years ago. So at that time, there was no border. And not only that, the geographical landscape are very similar very often. Now, for centuries, not only no border, but on the maps, there was a blank. Uh, Here, Ladakh is mentioned as Little Tibet, Petit Tibet. It's a French map from the 18th century, and you don't see any border, but you see blanks. So the geographical knowledge of this area was quite poor. And it's true for Tibet, but it's also true for Ladakh. Just full blank, and I think it's thanks mainly to what we call the Pandits, the people of Himalayan origin, from Kinnaur, from Lahore, from other places, who worked for the Survey of India in Dehradun with the British, who started mapping in the 19th century all that area. So if there's no map, there's no also question of a border. And of course, life was less aggressive than it is today. So I want to, in this first part, try to explain what is a border. Border as big as come in the 17th, 18th century with the Westphalian system. Suddenly, that is my territory, that is your territory, and in between there's a border. But still, it continued for decades, even for more than 2 centuries, without mapping, without delineation. Now, when the British came to the subcontinent, they were very keen to mark the border. So, because it was a Western concept of the border, originally between Ladakhi and Tibetan, there was some dispute for some grazing grounds or something like that, but there's no such a thing as a demarcated or a fenced border. So now, how to define a border? There's different principles which are used. For example, the mountain range, the Himalaya, the watershed. Now, in some of places, like northern Sikkim, for example, it's very clear. Or most of the areas in Uttarakhand, The border is quite clear. The line, the watershed, the where the water goes one side or another is quite clear, and you know where is the border. Um, a pass can be a border also. Like you have Bumla in Arunachal, Natula in Sikkim, Chipkila in Himachal, Lanakla or Karakoram Pass in Ladakh. So you cross the pass and you're on the other countries. So traditionally, people knew the caravans, the traders, the monks, whoever was visiting the pilgrims, they knew they crossed this. A river can be a border, like in international law, the middle of the river. Like for example, the Rhine River between France and Germany. The middle of the river is a border. And if there's to be custom houses, they are both sides of the river. But more importantly, for Himalaya, for the Himalayan region, for the Himalayan belt, for Ladakh in particular, pasture, the grazing grounds can demarcate, can show that one area belongs to a country and another area belongs to the other country. And I will come to the case of Ladakh before. Here I have mentioned Gyakong, which is north of Sikkim. The Tibetan had no sense of what is a watershed. They didn't care. What they care where they could send the yaks. And the yaks could go few kilometers, maybe 15, 20 kilometers south of the watershed. And where they could find the yak, that was their countries. And similarly in Ladakh, I will come to it, many places. And lake can also mark a border. Normally, like in the case of Pangong, that is the middle of the lake, but Chinese have not always respected that principle. But in international law, it's very clear. So that is the way to define the border. So now these principles do not apply in every places. Some places you have to use pasture, grazing ground. Some places it's clear there's a pass, some clear watershed. And it's the British who introduced that first, the principle. And in 1890, they signed a treaty with the Manchu. But like the colonialist power usually do, they signed an agreement on the northern border of Sikkim without mentioning to the Sikkim government, which was an independent nation at that time, and not to the Tibetan, who also were more or less independent. So they just signed with the Manchu in Beijing and say that's done. And similarly, they did for southern Sikkim, where the Doklam incident took place in 2017. They say there's one peak there, Gemochen, that's the border. But the British realized very soon that Sikkim, it was an independent state. Tibet was more or less independent. Bhutan was independent, and they immediately refused. When the British, soon after signing the convention with the Chinese, the British start to erect pillars, like in the Dokala area near Doklam, where the incident took place. They were broken the next morning by the Tibetan. They said, we don't recognize. Because once again, they were recognizing while the British were recognizing the watershed, they were more into the grazing grounds where the yaks could graze. Now, the first time there was very extensive talks on the border, and I think it lasted for 6 months. There was 5-6 rounds of talks, and the Ministry of External Affairs run the talks along with the Chinese. Chu Enlai had come in April 1960 in Delhi, and he agreed with Nehru, the Prime Minister of India, to have border talks. So during these talks, they divided in different way to agree on the border. One was based on treaty and agreements. So India argue on behalf of Ladakh that the 1842 Treaty of Shushul mentioned the border, and the border was clear. There was no issue about it. That is Demchok. That the 1890 treaty with Northern Sikkim with the Manchu, that the Tibetan never recognized, mentioned the watershed, and that was the border. And the other treaty, the only one with a map actually, is in 1914, the McMahon line. After 6 months of negotiation in Shimla, there was a tripartite conference, which included on the same level the British plenipotentiary, which was Sir Henry McMahon, the Foreign Secretary of India, Lochen Chatra, the Prime Minister of Tibet, and Ivan Chen, the Chinese representative. The Chinese representative was not interested by the northeastern frontier of India. So on the side of the conference in Shimla, the British, Henry McMahon and Lochen Chatra, signed an agreement on the map, on two big maps actually, and they put their seal. So it's only the entire 4,056 kilometers of what is today the China-India border. It's only map that we have. During the talks in 1960, they said the border can be based on tradition and custom. Like in Demchok, the caravan would cross, they would go to the next village, Tashigang in Tibet. Everyone knew, excuse me, Demchok was in India, Tashigang was in Tibet. But they didn't bother to put pillars or to demark it. Similarly, Chipkila or Nitila in Uttarakhand or Barauti. And the third way, the third classification where during the discussion was based on administration is jurisdiction. Administration means when you collect house taxes, for example. If you collect house taxes from a certain area, it means that, and nobody objects to that, it means that this territory belongs to you. That is the case, for example, in Nilang and Jadang in Uttarakhand, in Chamoli district. There was a dispute, but clearly the Teri Garwal, the Darbar, the prince of the Teri, would collect the taxes from these villages. Therefore, it was part of Teri area. Therefore, it was part of India. And in Ladakh also, in 1960, there was Indian diplomats present a lot of documents. I don't know how they got it, but on the land taxation of all the areas, beyond Nyoma, Dungti, Koyul, all these till Demchok, all these areas, they collected the land revenue records, and they could show to the Chinese who had no records. Chinese, of course, before 1960 were not nowhere. They only they had just come a few months ago, but they had started claiming a lot of Ladakhi territory in some of the places that I mentioned at the beginning, which are today disputed. And I put three classifications. The pre-independence claim. Like the Tibetan were claiming that place Nilang Jadang in Uttarakhand, what is Uttarakhand today. One place, I'll come to it after, Drogpo Karpo, which is north of the Pangonso. And there have been disputes for about 30 years between Ladakh, the Ladakh administration, the Wazir al-Wasrar, and on one side, and the Kingdom of Jammu and Kashmir, and the other side, the Tibetan administration, the Garpen, the district governor of Nari, of the Western Tibet. Similarly, in Taiwan, there were some areas which were claimed by the Tibetans. Actually, there's 3 places only which were claimed by Tibetan. That is Nilang, Dokpo Kapo, and Taiwan. And the other pre-independent claim, the nationalist China had created a province in 1938-39 called Xikang, and they start claiming the entire northeast till the foothills, what is Assam today. So now they have also the post-independence claim, like the accession in 1947 when India became independent. 1949, China became communist, and Mao Zedong united the entire China. There was no claim up till that time of accession, because for the good reason that Eastern Turkestan was more or less independent, though under the tutelage of the Soviets. And also in the Demchok area, in 1954, there was the talks for the Panchil. And for the first time, India realized that the Chinese negotiator kept asking for Demchok. And like they do very often, they start changing the name. They didn't call it Demchok anymore. And they said, no, India insisted to mention Demchok as a border for 6 months. And there was a big fight between the Indian negotiator and the Chinese negotiator. China refused. As a result, there was 5-6 passes like Nitila, Lipuklek, Manala, Chipkila in the central sector, but it never anything was mentioned on paper about Demchok. And this Chinese call it Parigas, that area. So Indian negotiator couldn't understand what is this Parigas about. Many times China, like they do, they have done recently a few months ago in Arunachal, they change the name of the place. So it's just for confusing the issue. And also the third classification is the post-1962 conflict. In 1960, China produced a map that they said that is our claim. They went beyond during the 1962 war, and particularly in Depsang area, and now they refuse to vacate this area. Cultural background, you're aware of the Changchun Kingdom. We don't know exactly the geographical definition, but that was Ladakh's neighbor and northern India's neighbor, and apparently that more and more research has been done on the archaeological research, and other research have been done on this kingdom, which was pre-Buddhist. The Tibetan had a tendency to forget the pre-Buddhist history, but now it has changed, and many scholars have been studying that kingdom, and that was the neighbor of Ladakh at that time. And I must say that the Chinese have been doing a lot of archaeological research, but for their own purpose. I put political archaeology because they would like to show that all the civilization, everything has come from China, and even Narikosum, all the area in Western Tibet, all these Toling, Saparang, all these very beautiful historical sites, they try to prove politically that this has been part of the Chinese empire, which was not the case, because all these areas have been closely linked with northern India, Ladakh in particular, Kinnaur, Laol, Spiti, and you see when you go to Alshi and you go to Saparang, you understand immediately that the very deep cultural connection. But China would like today that we forget about this connection. Unfortunately, from the Indian side, there's much less archaeology research which has been done. The big turning point for the Tibetan Plateau was when the first monastery was built in Samye, and with the help of Guru Padmasambhava. And very soon after, there was a dispute between the Indian and the Chinese school of Buddhism. And at that time, when there's a dispute, it's debated, and the monks debated intensely for 2 years between 792 and 794, and the Indian path finally prevailed on the Chinese path. So that's why Tibetan Buddhism today, including the Buddhism which is practiced in Ladakh, is come from India, and many of the part of the tradition come from Nalanda. Dalai Lama, who is starting his teaching today, has mentioned time and again that the Tibet Buddhism is originally from Nalanda University. But there was a proclamation in Samye that from the Indian way would be thereafter the state religion of Tibet. And of course, it is valid for Tibet, but it applies also to the Himalayan belt, which was very close culturally and religiously from central Tibet. Now Tibet became a big empire. It invaded part of China, part of what is today Xinjiang, eastern to Turkestan, northern India, and I don't have to tell you about that. But it also spread that culture and that religion of Tibet. And you aware, I don't have to say much about Nimagon, who divided the king of Western Tibet, who divided his kingdom into three. That was the birth of Mariul, what is Ladakh today, and based in She, the capital. And since then, Ladakh, that was 10th century, since then Ladakh has been independent country, though for some time under the kingdom of Jammu and Kashmir in India. When the Buddhism disappeared from Tibet because due to the fights between the Burn original faith and the Buddhism, but when it reappeared on the border area in Ladakh. I don't know, from Rinchen Zampo, the main main monk who propagate Buddhism for the second propagation. I don't know where he's born. Some people say he's born in Kinnour, some people he's born in Western Tibet. But it was culturally one area, whether from Alpi to Tabo to Chaparong and Toli. So that was a very, very rich, that was like we have in the West, the Renaissance. That was the Renaissance of Buddhism, with very rich art, painting, and also religious studies, art, and all this, the origin comes from the south, from the subcontinent. It doesn't come from China like today the regime in Beijing would like to prove it. So I think it's very important to research more in this and to show that India and Ladakh and the Tibetan Plateau have been culturally one entity, though politically they were separate. And you have the Amchi system of medicine that the government of India a few years ago has incorporated in the youth. So that's for tantras, the gyuchi, and this come also for 80-90% from India, though it's incorporated. I'm sure I've not studied in depth the Amchi system, but there is a lot of local practices also which were included in with a base, the four tantras of gyuchi was a base. From there, many other system have been incorporated, including the local system, whether it's in Ladakh or in Tibet or elsewhere. And it included also Chinese, for example, Moksha Bukshan. The practice of Moksha Bukshan comes from the Chinese. Here you have one lady doctor doing the golden needle therapy. This probably also come from China. So it has incorporated different system, but for 80% it come from India. Now I just mentioned about Ladakh and archaeology. I wish that more archaeological research would take place in Ladakh. I know there's some French archaeologists working, but I think it's very important to show the routes that the people were taking, going to Central Asia, going to Kashgar, to Khotan, to what is Xinjiang today, and to show that really that very, very special place culturally, and how old these areas. So I think some research have started, mainly with some French archaeologists, and the French government is involved also. But I think it should also, some Ladakhi also have done research, but I think it should really develop and just show the routes that people were taking. Now, what happened that Buddhism disappeared from India? So the source, whether it's for Ladakh or for Tibet or for Bhutan, the source of the knowledge of the Dharma disappeared. So once I asked the Dalai Lama what was the reason, he said there's 4 reasons according to him. The advent of Adi Shankara, who incorporated many aspects of Buddhism into Hinduism, into Brahmanism. The shift of patronage, also the kings started, instead of patronizing the Buddhist monastery, the viharas, like Odantapuri or Nalanda or others, they shifted their patronage. And one was, of course, the Muslim invasion, because they raised most of these viharas. Because interestingly, the Buddhism, if you compare to Hinduism, in each house you have a small temple, you have a small deity, you have a small family deity, and that you worship. Most of the Buddhism, I'm speaking generally, but most of the Buddhism was around the big viharas, the big monasteries in northern India. And once these monasteries are destroyed, nothing was left. Well, it was much more difficult to destroy Hinduism. So that's why the 4th reason that the Dalai Lama given me. Now, for Ladakh, you have the Treaty of Tingmotsang after First War between Ladakh and the Mongol Ladakh and Tibet. There was a treaty, and they speak about the boundary fixed in the beginning when Nimagon gave a kingdom to each of his 3 sons shall be maintained. Here again, in the different classification I've given, that is a customary border. Means people knew that there's a nala between. Now there's 2 parts, and Demchok. There's a Chinese Demchok and Indian Demchok, but there's a nala in between. And you cross that nala in you're in Tibet. You're going toward Tashigang. That was quite clear, but there's no map of it. And Chinese saying they no map, they start claiming other places. And the second treaty, I briefly mentioned it, after the Sikh-Tibet war from 41 and to 42, Zawar Singh was defeated. He was killed near Purang, near the trade junction with Nepal. But the treaty was signed, and it was reiterated that the border before the beginning of war it will be the border. We shall neither at present nor in the future have anything to do or interfere with all the boundaries of Ladakh and its surrounding as from the ancient times. So this treaty was signed, and it was clear, and nobody objected to it, and nobody asked also, where's the map? Is the like this Zarovar Fort actually is in today in China. It's just the other side of Shushul, but nobody bothered about it because, and nobody bothered also for the ranges on the side. If you go along the Indus from Demchok to Dungti, one side you have the Kailash range, and the other side you have the Ladakh range. Nobody claim this range belongs to me, or this it belongs to my country, because people were traders or pilgrims or monks, and they would follow a route. So it was more important a route that a border. You follow the route, and at one point you cross into the other countries. So that's why I was saying that this archaeological research or studies should also include the study of the routes, because routes in the when, for example, the caravan would go from Leh to Lhasa, the Lopchak, nobody bothered that this Kailash range or this Kailash range was clearly in Ladakh, but nobody bothered what the peaks on the range belong to Ladakh or belong to Tibet. So the old trade route was very important for both countries. You have, for example, in Uttarakhand today, you have heard about 700 or 800 villages which are ghost village. These villages have been totally emptied because once the trade was closed in 1962 after the war, everything stopped. All the caravans stopped going. This Radu family, that Professor Siddiq Said's family and Abdul Wahid family from Ladakh were trading with entire Tibet, Central Asia, everywhere, and they were just crossing. And that was the life of the areas. That was the life of Ladakh. That was the life of Himachal Pradesh, Kinnaur, Lahore, of Uttarakhand today. All these passes were not barrier to stop people. They were actually avenues where the trade caravan and people and pilgrim and all were passing. And at that time, there is no passport. So in this area of Western Tibet, there was not only that very important Indian trade agency in Gartok, but there were also many trade marts. And each group of village, for example, from Uttarakhand, was assigned a particular trade mart, and the traders were going there, spending 6 months and coming back. Usually they had a Tibetan name when they were going in summer in Tibet, and they had the Indian name when they come back. Similarly, in Ladakh, people would go to Tashigang or Gartok. So there was an intensive exchanges, cultural exchanges, religious exchanges, economic trade exchanges, but there was never a question of fighting for a border. And the other issue that in Tigmotang Treaty of 1684, a village was given to Ladakh and Minsar, which is near the Kailash Tangrinpoche and Kailash Mount Kailash, and this village was supposed to collect money to pay for the butter lamps and all the maintaining some of the temples around the Mount Kailash. And in 1984, there was the negotiation for the Panchil, Nehru said, please don't mention, we don't want anybody to, we don't want to claim any areas. But legally, if you look at the, it has never been settled in the sense that I think legally it's still part of Ladakh, though there is no question or no possibility. Actually, the political officer in Sikkim was looking after this area in the 50s. I did done some research in the National Archive. I found quite a few files. They said we can't collect the tax, we can't defend this area, so just forget about it. It still belongs to Ladakh, but nobody can do anything about it. But it's just a historical anecdote about these areas. I said no map. I've looked for years to find maps of all maps of Ladakh and also Arunachal. I mean, at that time, Nepal, and I found only this map, which are kept in the British Museum in London. And you can see Tashigang, the south is up and the north is down. No, so you find Tashigang. So, but this mark again, there's no border about this mark. 285 is Tashigang, and 286 is Demchok. And there's a Demchok Samba, but I think the bridge, but it doesn't exist anymore. And after that, you go deeper into Ladakh. So the fact there was no map, somehow there was no border dispute at the same time. It was a gentleman agreement between the neighbors, and there was a relatively good neighborhood. Everyone was has their own perception, but there was a generally good agreement. Another map of Gartok and Gargonsa, which is Western Tibet. So apart from that map, I've never found. I'm very happy if some of you students find a map in, I don't know, if some archive or in Jammu or in Srinagar or even in Ladakh. But I've never heard about maps. I'll be very happy if you find maps of this area. And so I mentioned about Shimla conference, and for 6 months they met, and something interesting for Ladakh which is not very well known. When the maps were exchanged, okay, in March 1914, the McMahon line was signed between McMahon and Lochan Chatra. But on the same map, you have the end of the map. I don't know if you see where the cursor here. It shows the map in north of Ladakh, and actually it corresponds to the Johnson line, which is the Indian claim of 1865. And the Chinese at that time accepted that map and never objected. I think nobody told them, but probably they didn't know also extremely well that area, because there was no Chinese in 1914 in this area. But this map shows that. So I mentioned the signature. Now I come to the only disputed place in Ladakh, and basically it was that area, Dokpo Karpo, north of the lake, was disputed because of grazing. The Ladakhi grazer was saying it belongs to Ladakh, and the Tibetan, the Garpen, the governor of Western Tibet, it belongs to Tibet. So there were negotiations every 2-3 years. There's a negotiation. The Ladakhi, the people from Srinagar would come, and the British resident would come, and as well as the Garpen of Western Tibet. And at the time of independence, the dispute was not solved, but practically Tibetan were occupying it. Therefore, after when Chinese came in after 1959, they took that area. But it was the only place. So other places, like we speak about where the Galwan, where the confluence of the Chok and the Galwan River, there's no discussion, not even question of grazing right or anything like that. Similarly for the fingers area. You see, the fingers, there's not places that you can send the yak. So nobody was really, there was no formal claim of this area. And that's issue which culminated in May of 2020, 3 years ago, with China saying, started advancing the line, which has never been marked. And to end the first part today, again there was extensive exchanges, and that Swami Pravananda, he did a very detailed. All these books are in PDF. Actually, you can find them, of the Kailash area and all the pilgrims. But what I wanted to say, these pilgrims, they didn't carry any Aadhaar card or driving license or any paper or any photo ID photo or anything. You could freely cross these passes, go the other side, go to the Nari, and come back the same way. Nobody would check. There was no police, because one of the first things that Nehru did, he put the police. That's why today you have the ITBP on the border. You created a police force for guarding the border, and later on the army came. And today you see how many divisions you have in Ladakh. You have one full corps and 4 divisions. So but at that time, there's not even police. There's not a police, and people could travel. The last consul general in Kashgar, in Xinjiang, was expelled by the Chinese in December 1950, and he crossed on his own from Kashgar to Leh. He walked for 1 month. Nobody knew where he was, but he didn't meet anybody on the road, and there was no question of stopping him. Even the China it's only after 1960, 61, 62, they start posting border guards and like that. And Colonel Chen Rinchen, who was awarded twice Mahavir Chakra, is one of the person when he was serving in the army who set up this first post. But till then, that time, there was no post, and there's no border, and there's no real issue till the Chinese came in Xinjiang and in Tibet. So that is the first part of my.
Thank you, Claude Arpi, for your very interesting and insightful talk on a very important topic. Important because we are from a political science department, but also we are from the area. We know the importance. We used to, come across the importance of border day to day life. Thank you very much for your interesting talk. You talk about a French researcher in Ladakh. His name is Quentin. He's still in Leh. He's doing research on archaeology in Ladakh. Now, there are some questions from the participants and some comments also. One of the comments is by Tempa Dargal. Very interesting how Buddhism played a role and continues to play a role in strategic borderlands. He has a question for you, sir. How can we utilize the art, be it Tibetan or Indian art, as a soft pass to convince the world that the contested borderlands is their territory? So this is his question.
I think it's very important. I mentioned several times archaeology, but also art and architecture, and Western Tibet is so close from Ladakh, as well as other areas like in Kinor and all. So more research. I don't know if the government realizes this. As you're aware that ASI sometimes is little administrative, to put it nicely, and they don't realize. But I think it's Government slowly realized that there's a border issue, mainly after May of 2020. So I mentioned, for example, these villages which are becoming empty. Now they have started government vibrant village, including in Ladakh. Many of this. That is a very good scheme. India should really help these villages and should also help to restore the Gompa study. I think more scholarly work has to be done to study migration also, art, culture, from where these artists would come. When they went to Chaparran or Toling, they were coming from India, no? So, and you can see the influence of the Kashmiri art, many of them. It is true that in eastern Tibet, in Kham, you see more influence of the Chinese, but all the Nali area, it's all the influence of Kashmir, Ladakh, and all. So this should be really documented by scholars, no? And of course, it has a political value, a soft. Now we speak about soft power, but China is doing it very, very systematically, like the excavation. It should be done in, and also I think it's very important to study the pre-Buddhist area. What are the migration? Where, could people live in near Pangong So, for example, when the water was salted? Some people, I remember about 20 years ago, had studied the pollens which were on the Pangong so that they could see, they could find out what was the climate at that time. Apparently, the entire Indus Sarasvati civilization disappeared because of climate change. There was a change of climate. It was in this what is Pakistan today. The Sarasvati River disappeared, but it was also on the Tibetan plateau. While researches have been done on the on the Indus Sarasvati side, included how the river disappeared. No research has been done in Ladakh or in Tibet. There was one fellow, I used to be in contact with him, Professor Vincent Beleza. I think he had done a lot of research on the stone painting in Ladakh and well in Tibet, and that was interesting. But more people should do this research, and the government should facilitate, because unless the government facilitate excavation, it will be very difficult. So it's not only art from the second propagation of Buddhism from Rinchen Sambo's time, which is important, which has been in some way Alchi or Tabo had been researched, but also before that, and shows these areas have been closed. Like nobody study really the migration of the Amchi system, no? The history of the Amchi system from the Burn and how it evolved, how it incorporated the Burn tradition and all this. So I think it's up to you in Ladakh University to do this thing, but you need the help of the government, because especially for excavation, you need all the permission and everything. But I think it's fascinating what happened 2000 BC with the climate change. What happened in the life of the people in Ladakh, or which area were inhabited.
Thank you. So there is another question from Jikmet Spaldon. What is the most dramatic change witnessed in the border outline between Ladakh and Tibet when Namgyal dynasty was replaced by Nimagon's Lachen dynasty?
You see, I think the most dramatic is 1950, when the Chinese enter first Turkestan, and I'll go to it in my second part. and a few months later, Western Tibet. And because before you could speak with your neighbor, you could discuss, you could negotiate. Dopogarbo, you discuss for 35 years. Nothing much happened. The grazer keeps sending their yachts. But there's no war. Look at what has happened in May 2020. You know, how many 70,000 Jawan and officer on both sides, on each side, no? So that is the most dramatic for the border. I think only when His Holiness Dalai Lama crossed in Nifa in Arunachal today in March of 1959. That was the beginning of the border issue with China, because before China, first of all, they don't know very well where was the border. In the 50s, they start establishing their presence in the Tibetan plateau, but they didn't know very well where was the border. But after March 59, they were, I think, probably very upset that India has received the Dalai Lama so well. And the first incident took place in Spangor Gap in 1959, as well in Longju in Arunachal Pradesh in August 1959. And immediately after, there was a long series of letters exchanged between Nehru and Chou Enlai, and that's the beginning of the border issue. And it came to 1960, the negotiation that I mentioned. But all this I will cover in the second part. So the turning point, the most dramatic change was change of neighbor, the new neighbor coming in, China, with the Eastern Turkestan. There was trade. There was trade to Central Asia. All like the Radu family, they used to. They had go down in Kashgar, go down in Central Asia, everywhere, in Lhasa also, and the caravan were going. Nobody has anything, a passport or anything like that, and life went on without a border. But the border came alive in, I would say, September, October 1959. I will cover it next time.
Okay. So there is another question, sir. Uh, it's from Punchok Namgyal. How far you think that the present Chinese government is involved in promoting Buddhism?
Yeah, present Chinese government is not involved in promoting Buddhism, and but they see that politically they can use Buddhism. And for example, they have selected their own Panchen Lama that they extensively use for their own propaganda. Now, I don't know if you're aware, I won't go into the detail, but there's every 5 years, there's this Tibet Work Forum. It's a meeting with 300 or 250 or 300 officials, all the top officials. It means the standing committee of the Politburo, half of the Central Committee, the Central Military Commission, all the big shot they meet in Beijing, and they decide the policy for Tibet for the next 5 years. So in 2015, they decided to do these Xiaokong villages, border villages. So now you have 600 or 700 villages. Now the last, that was the seventh work forum, they decided to Sinicization of the religion in China. So it includes Buddhism, it includes Islam. That's why people in Xinjiang are revolting, and it includes also the Catholic religion. And but in Tibet, there's extensive campaign led by the Chinese Panchen Lama, the boy who's been chosen by the Chinese government after putting the one selected by the Dalai Lama in jail, or we don't know his fate. Since 25 years, we don't know. So they selected their own Panchen Lama, and they have one objective only: Sinicization of Tibetan Buddhism. What means Sinicization? Means that the Tibetan Buddhism has to be first answer to the Communist Party and follow first the rule. Xi Jinping always speaks about the rule of law. Rule of law means the law of the party. So there is no freedom. If you look at these villages, these 600 or 700 Xiaogang village, and there are few also on the Ladakh border, like in Demchok, Chinese Demchok, or Chakang, one place also on the other side of the Kailash Ren. These villages, they have no shirtan, no stupa, no prayer flags, no. Sometimes they have a small gompa, but it's more for tourists, because now Tibet lives mainly with tourism. They say that before COVID, 40 million of Chinese Han have come from the mainland and visited Tibet. You know how extensive the infrastructure, including the train between Lhasa and Ningxi. The train now goes to Chigatse. Very soon, in 2030-35, there will be a train going to across Lake Shashin. So they bring tourism because they say tourism will bring revenue, will make people slightly better off, and people will be happy. And but they should remain communist. And so we can't really speak about promoting Buddhism. It's promoting Chinese Buddhism with communist characteristic.
So there is another question from Tenzin Sherab. Can you provide us the latest updates on Chinese military strength near the Ladakh and the central sector?
There's about the same number of both sides, India and China. I would say 60, 70,000. But I think what is important to understand is the infrastructure that the Chinese have developed to reach Pangong Tso, to reach Galwan, to reach Depsang, or the number of helipad they have built. And I have a lot of maps of this development. And today, because of satellite imagery from abroad, we can have a very clear picture of this development. So more than the number of Jawan and more number of troops is the infrastructure development. India has done a lot. I think now the road is going. I think from Leh you can go to Nyoma there is a nice tar road. I think this year they will do Nyoma to Chushul. Nyoma to Demchok also will be completed. India has done a lot, but in Ladakh is slightly different from the other areas like Arunachal or Sikkim. But generally speaking, the terrain is much more difficult on the Indian side. That is particularly true in Arunachal Pradesh and as well in Uttarakhand. You know what has happened in Uttarakhand with the floods. Dr. Sonam was saying about you have rain in Ladakh, but it's very, very bad. So all the roads, which are strategic roads, are being destroyed. China is doing, have a rule. Actually, it's a law. They have dual use for everything, which in particular for infrastructure. If airport is built, for example, there's a new airport in Purang, where Zarawar Singh was killed, in the tri-junction with Nepal. That airport should be use the standard, the military standard, as well the civilian standard. Every piece of architecture, whether it's an airport, a helipad, a new road, the railway lines, everything should be done for dual use. It's a law in China, so it makes it very, very difficult to compete for India to compete with China. Though now you are aware that India has been relaxing the rule. I have been telling for since 15, 20 years, you should relax ILP, the Indian Inner Line Permit, for, mainly in Arunachal, but also this protected area permit. So now I read 2-3 weeks ago that foreign tourists can go to Amle. I believe there's a fashion show in Umlingla, which is highest is higher than Kardungla. So I don't know, it's going to take place or it has taken place of the highest fashion show in the world. So encouraging tourists. My argument was that this area, Indian area, you should they should not disturb the defense forces, but let people see this area. If you stop people, China said, you have a doubt, you're not sure that is your area. Similarly, in Arunachal, now government has really, since 2-3 years, relaxed the permit for the border area. So I think it's a good thing. It's good also to bring some, it helps people. Last year I went to Shushul and I asked the villagers, they said, we want tourists, we want to have a homestay, we will get some revenue. We don't get enough from agriculture. So that is the good side of the bad thing, which is a military confrontation. But India had to look seriously at the issue of development for this border area. And they say we would like our children to go till 12 standard to Shushul. Why should they go to Leh? But it will take time to pick up and to organize and everything. But first, if you have roads, if you have telecommunications, people will not go for taxi driver in Leh or like that. They will do homestay and like that. So I think it's changing. It's changing slowly, but in China, it's always changing faster. So we can't do anything about that, because the regime is such that you don't have a local MLA or local person elected from the Ladakh Hill Council or like that. There's no democracy. Democracy is slightly slower, but ultimately it is much, much more stable. Look at what happened yesterday to the Minister of External Affairs of China, who has been sacked and nobody knows where he has gone. So that is an issue.
Thank you, sir. It's over to Rebon Banerjee Dar.
Thank you very much. We missed out one question, which I think we should take note of.
Keep it for Friday.
Yes, we keep it for Friday. Thank you, Claude. So thank you very much, Sonam Joldan, for organizing this talk at your university. And thank you, Claude, for delivering the first part of your very enlightening, as always, talk to the students and the faculty members. So thank you very much once again. Thank you. And July, and then we see everybody on Friday. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.